Let's go.
Okay. My name is Halivni. I'm here with Peleg Levy on February 1st, 2023, and we are meeting and hearing from Professor Shmuel Sprecher in Ramat Gan.
Right. I must somewhat correct what you said.
Okay.
My official name is Milon Sprecher. My Hebrew name is Shmuel Sprecher. Actually, I was born, where I will get to later, under a slightly different name. Our name originally was Schoner or Schöner, with O umlaut, Schöner. The reason for that is that my grandfather, my father's father, whose name was Sprecher, from Lemberg, right, or Levy now it is called, and they were quite a wealthy people. They were, in fact, suppliers for the Austrian-Hungarian army, but during the First World War, they ran away from the Russians, and they ran until they got to Vienna. And my father's father lived in Vienna, what's called the first district, the erste Bezirk, not far der Roten Turmstraße. When my father was about to get married, they wanted documentation and so on, and it turned out that my grandfather, whose name was Aaron Sprecher, had married his third wife only bechuppe kiddushin, not officially registered. And so he was considered, as it were, an illegitimate child, and he had to take on the name of his mother. Right? The name of the mother was Shapiro Schöner. Actually, Schöner, or Schoner, if you without the umlaut, is a translation of Shapir, of Shafir, of nice, right? And so he had to change the name to Schoner at the time when he got married, or Schöner. My mother was Esther Blech. And lived in Vienna in zweiten Bezirk. That was part of what is called the Matzeinsel, which was a part of an island in the Danube. First we lived in, that I remember, that I was born, in Milford.
Your family, how far back can you, where was your family from? How far back can you talk about your family?
Oh, about my family, I can't talk further back than my father. Right. Exactly where my father was born, I'd have to look up. I have to go and get. But it was some town not far from Lemberg, but I don't remember the name. I have it written down somewhere.
Do you know when he was born?
What?
When was he born, your father?
I think in 1903, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, as I was getting back, he met my mother in Vienna. My mother's name, as I said, was Esther Blech. And they got married there. And when they want to take out documents, as I said, he couldn't get his father's name, who was Sprecher, because he hadn't married officially, only a Chuppah Kiddushin. It had been his third wife. And they gave him, as I said, registered him as Schöner or Spierer Schöner, which was actually a name, but only Schöner in German. When we became American citizens, to which I'll get later, in 1950, we were able to change back our name to my grandfather's name, Sprecher, or Sprecher. Okay? And from then on, as I say, in our naturalization certificate, on the back has written down the change of name which took place at that time. Now, basically, except for some small items, I have to start the life history at about the Anschluss, when the Germans incorporated Austria. Before that, I had learned at the Talmud Torah.
When were you born?
In 1929, March 19, 1929.
In
Vienna.
In Vienna.
In Vienna. At an early age, as religious Jews started, these children very early, went to a Talmud Torah, and then to a Jewish school, which was located in Kastelitzgasse, which was near the park called the Augarten. Later on, we moved to across the street to Mühlfeldgasse number 5, and we had an apartment on the second floor, a corner apartment, as it were, from which you could look out onto the main road into which Mühlfeldgasse ran on one side. That was called Heinestraße. And when the Nazis came, and so forth, we weren't supposed to look through the windows. Curtains were drawn over the windows. And as it were, at the time, they caught Jews, made them wash the streets. Fortunately, our father at the time was not in Austria. Why? My father's hobby was learning languages. He knew 5 European languages.
Fix your keeper.
He knew 5 European languages, and as a result, he was able to get the representation of an Austrian factory that manufactured knives to sell them all over Europe. The name of the factory that manufactured the knife were called Hackwerke, I remember. And since he represented them traveling all over Europe, fortunately, when the Germans took over Austria, he was in Holland. And so he was not caught by them. They came to look for him, but he was in Holland. They showed letters that he was in Holland. At the time, was in Holland, traveling all over Europe. Also, because he was a commercial traveler and had to have a valid passport, the Polish anti-Semitin who cancelled the Bürgerschaft of all who had not been in Poland for 5 years, which was meaning that not allowing Jews who had run away in the First World War and had not been back to Poland in the last 5 years, they had no protection anymore from any foreign to German Austria, from any other, they couldn't appeal to any other government, and that was intentional by the Polish anti-Semitism. Fortunately, because my father was a commercial traveler, as I say, all over Europe, he had a valid passport. And the valid passport, the problem was it was a personal passport. At the time, there was in Switzerland a representative who was favorable to the Jews. And he was recently, a couple of years ago, recognized here as Chassid Umot HaOlam. And so, since my father was in Europe and we were in Austria, he appealed to this Chassid Umot HaOlam in Switzerland, who turned the personal passport into a family passport, right? And so we had now documents on which we were able to. The problem was we were in Austria and he was in the rest of Europe. So I don't know exactly how. I know they used to communicate. My mother wrote to my father what was called post restant. In other words, he would say, I'd be in this and this town at this and this time. She would write a letter to that town, post restant, meaning it would be kept in the major post office, in the main post office, and he would go and pick up the letters. I guess in this way they communicated, and he arranged with my mother. He would come into Karlsruhe, which was a railway center in Germany, and the Austrian Germany 101, so we could travel within that country without documents. And he would meet us, and he met us on in the station, in the railway station. We met, and exactly how they managed to arrange it, as I say, they managed to communicate. There were no telephones at the time. And he met us in Karlsruhe on the station platform, and from there, since his passport was now a family passport, we were able to go into Switzerland, into Baden. We immediately went into Baden to Switzerland. In Switzerland...
One second. When was this?
This was in 1938.
And how many were you in your family?
We were three, my mother, and I have a brother, Benjamin Gidal Sprecher, who now lives in Yerushalayim. Unfortunately, at the moment he's sick in hospital, but and I have a sister, Leah or Lily, who they don't married Rabbi Dr. Dimitrovsky. Here.
In what place are you in the family?
I'm the oldest.
You're the oldest.
I'm the oldest. Then comes my sister, and Benno or Benjamin is the youngest. So he met us in Karlsruhe. We went to Baden, to Switzerland. In Switzerland, we had an uncle who was a rabbi, Switzerland didn't allow Schritte at the time, and so that uncle used to travel in Europe, Schrott, and bring the meat into Switzerland. Anyway, we got into Switzerland. Now, in Switzerland, we only had a visitor's visa. So that to get us off the streets. My parents, of course, knew how to conduct themselves, but they were afraid the children would get on the street. So they sent us to Jewish, call them hostels, I don't know, in the villages in Switzerland. I was in a hostel called Heiden in Switzerland. And yes. As an aside, I would say, in Vienna, living with us were my mother's parents. My grandmother became sick on sugar,
diabetes.
Well, diabetes, right? And of course, at that time, for Jews, you couldn't get any hospitalization or anything. So my uncle, who was in Switzerland, came with a ambulance, picked up my grandparents, and got them back into Switzerland. As an aside, there's a little story there. One of my mother's sisters, I guess it was, had married into a man who lived in Switzerland, and she died. She died young. I don't know of what. She had one son who later on learned in Belgium and came to Eretz Israel and was a Rosh Yeshiva and Dayan by Belz Hasidim. He unfortunately, not long ago, a couple of years or two ago, he died. Where was I? Yeah. Now, as my parents, as it were, had only a visitor's visa in Switzerland, they had to eventually get out. And the problem was how to get out without being caught at the border crossing. So there was a Jew who lived in Strasbourg in France, who worked in Switzerland. And he used to travel every day from Strasbourg into Switzerland, had a car, and back again. So what was arranged with this Jew was that on 31st of December, at night, when the guards on the border were drunk, and he was known to them, he would take us lying down in his car, right? He would go by, would wave, that's what he did, would wave hello to the guards who were drunk that time. And he went through, he went to Strasbourg. That's how we got out of Switzerland without being caught illegally. My father...
Including your grandparents?
No, 1 second. Well, I will go back to my grandparents. My grandmother died in Switzerland. She wasn't Switzerland. And previously, when she was in Vienna still, and her daughter, who had married into a Swiss Jewish family, had died and was buried in Switzerland in the Haredi cemetery, because there are two cemeteries for Jews in New Zurich. The general one and the Haredi one. And she was bad. And the Haredi one, they bury people according to the date, one after the other, on the line. Not any specific place, but whenever you died, the next place is yours. And when she heard that her daughter had died, she said, "Ich will liegen neben ihr." Everybody took that as an expression of a grieving mother, right? But nobody took it seriously. Who thought somebody who's in Vienna would be buried in Zurich? Nothing. But as I said, eventually she was taken by her son, Ben Sionberg, to Switzerland, and she died there. And it turned out, by chance, as it were, that she was lying at the foot of her daughter. I mean, unbelievable. Next row to her daughter. Anyway, let me get back to where we were. We were in France. My mother said to my father, she had apparently read Mein Kampf or something, right? She didn't believe the Maginot Line would hold up. We have to get on further from France. Of course, the Germans never attacked the Maginot Line. They went around the Maginot Line to Holland and Belgium, right? But anyway, they want to go on. So my father was able, because he was a commercial traveler, he was able to take her into England. And they took her, I mean, they went, and with Benno, with my youngest brother, to England. In England, they said, well, what are you doing? He said, I travel with my wife. My wife. That's okay. But what is that baby doing? He said, oh, he's still suckling. So the English let it go, and they got to England. But they couldn't take me or my sister. So what they had arranged was that we would be in Jewish boarding schools near Paris. I don't remember the name of where my sister was at the time. I was in École Maimonides, that means the Rambam school, which was in Bois de Boulogne, not far from Paris. Camp Pesach, the boarding school, sent all the children to their home. We had no home. They found a family, or actually two families. One would take me in, and the other took in my sister. After Pesach, neither of us went back to the schools, since the hope was that any day now our parents would be able to get us to England in what at the time had taken place, Kindertransport, transport of children with a Kindertransport. Therefore, I didn't attend school either. I used to run around Paris picking up tickets at the stations. You know, they sold return tickets. Many people, it was apparently not much different than a one-way ticket. Many people used a return ticket as a one-way ticket and threw it away. So I used to pick up an unused return ticket and run around Paris. Eventually, as parents had planned, they were able to get us on a Kindertransport. So I got a notice that the family where I was, I got notice of where I was, that on the second day of Shavuos, I would have to travel to Calais and then to England. I was 9 going on 10. I went to ask a Rav, can I go on the second day of Shavuos? And the Rav asked me, no. And that was a taught. That was he was an Amoritz apparently. He didn't know because the halacha is, Katan she'ochel nevelot ein bedin mitzuvun lafrisho. What he should have told me is, do what your father is responsible for chinuch, that's true. Do what your father says. Don't tell him. But anyway, fortunately, on the second day of Shavuos, a telegram arrived. The group was going to be leaving 10 o'clock at night, which was already Motzei Shavuos. So I was able to go. And went on with the Kindertransport across the channel to England.
With your sister?
What?
With your sister?
My sister. The Kindertransport by the English Jews were arranged in Bloomsbury houses, like the Hayas. They arranged that families in England would adopt the children. And the families were, even Goyish families, adopted. So we were, as it were, adopted. And that's how we got to England. And then...
Together with your sister?
With my sister. And then, eventually, somewhere outside London, I don't remember anymore the name of the place. Anyway, this family who, as it were, adopted us, had to be paid off to release us. We were paid off and they released us.
To your parents?
Huh?
Released you to your parents?
Yeah, right. And they released us. And then my sister went to a public school in England, and I went to the public school. I guess it was nursery. I don't know what it was. I went to the Jewish secondary school in London shortly thereafter the war started, and they evacuated all the women and children from London. I was evacuated also, and my mother and my sister and the baby, of course, evacuated to a place called Nebworth, which is not far from the town Hitchin on one side, and before that the major town was one in Garden City, where they made shredded wheat. Anyway. But my father stayed in London, of course. My mother didn't want to leave my father alone in London, so after a while, short while, she went back to London. And I remained, as it were, in Nebworth. The family that they originally billeted us was more high-class family who had been pressured into accepting people, but would like to get rid of us. So they didn't feed us, but they sent us to an emergency kitchen was set up for evacuated people, and to eat there and out of the house a day. Eventually they managed to get rid of us in their birth. And
kosher food? How did you get kosher food?
No, there wasn't. No, there wasn't. And me, I got into a family, a religious Christian family. Since they were a religious Christian family, they understood that I wouldn't eat everything, and I would eat only vegetables and things like that. It was very fortunate, as it were, for me. The husband was in charge of the water supply in Nebworth. My parents in London appealed to Bloomsbury House. They should send somebody to teach us to this village. And so on Sundays, Rav would come up and spend time with us, teaching us. I was getting close to Bar Mitzvah already, close to 12 actually, eventually. And so my parents wanted I should get a better Jewish education. There was in a small town, I think south of London, called Dorking. And there was somebody who was had been a dine in Frankfurt. And what he did was he rented an apartment, a big house with a garden and so on, and he sublet parts of that house to other Jews. This died in Frankfurt, and thus created, as it were, a little Jewish group. He had a son called Benjamin Posen, and another son called Yaakov, and 3 daughters. If again I go, so he learned with his son Benjamin and with me also. When I got close to, he taught his son a drosha for bar mitzvah of 40 minutes, 40-minute drosha, which you had to learn by heart. You weren't allowed, like nowadays, to use a paper. And since he was he was a little bit older than me, I learned the same drosha, and for bar mitzvah, I was back in London. Back after having been a year there or so in Dorking, back in London. And let's see. Yeah. In London.
What's your bar mitzvah parsha?
Huh?
What's your bar mitzvah parsha?
What's it? One second. I think it's Tetzaveh, I think. In London, lived in Gloucester, at the beginning Gloucester Drive, and then we moved, I don't remember where, closer to the Glisol Park, but I don't remember exactly the name of the street anymore. And during the bombardments, we used to sleep in the cellar. Yeah, right. Now, I went to the emergency secondary school, the general secondary school, which is just and my parents got somebody from the Schneider Yeshiva, who were then in London, to learn with me after the secondary school. I would go to the Schneider Yeshiva, who'd gone there, and he would learn with me. Then came that was the bombardment, the V1s, and then came the V2s. The V2s, I'm sorry, the V1s first. The V1s was small planes carrying explosives, and you heard the engine. As long as the engine heard, the plane was going. Once the engine stopped, it was going to fall. So at the time, I went to emergency secondary school. You keep going, including examinations, until you hear the engine stop. Then you dive under the desk. Right? That was the instructions in the emergency secondary school. Of course, like all good schoolboys, we hoped that during the weekend when we weren't there, a bomb would fall on the school and we'd have a vacation. Well, it happened. A bomb fell across the street from a school, blew out all the windows, all the desks, everything. We arrived in the morning, next morning on Monday. Did they send us home? No. They marched us off to the girls' school. Had to continue. Anyway, later on, with the V2s, you only heard them after they exploded. But you could see a flash or something, and you saw such a V2 coming, you'd dive on the floor. I remember going home from the Shivot on the street, dying there on the floor during the war. Also, exactly what period I do not remember, but there was a man, a Rav, who had been a Rav, a Dayan in Frankfurt also, who lived in London, who learned with his son, and my parents got him, I should also sit in when he's teaching his son. So I was learning that. And I remember once going home from there, as I say, I saw the flash going over, I dived on the floor, and then you heard the thing going, the explosion. Anyway, we weren't going to stay in England because we didn't have any close relatives. For a while, when things were bad, I went to a place near Manchester called Buxton, where there was some far relative of ours. Then came home again, and eventually our turn, according to the American system. Being Polish citizens, our turn came to be able to go to America. And we had at the time already two uncles in America who'd been requested from Europe for communities, and they got a visa to go into America early. And so we got to America. We went by ship. It took about 2 weeks till Halifax, and then from Halifax by train to New York.
When was this?
What?
When?
This was in 45. We left England at the end of 44. We got to Halifax and to America in January 45. The ship trip took about 2 weeks. In 45, I sent in to Albany to my school records, and since England had a 5-year secondary school, in America only a 4-year secondary school, they gave me a year's college credit. And since I had skipped some of the English secondary school by my performance, they skipped me. In fact, I only, out of the 5 years, I only did 3 and a third year before, as it were, graduating. So in Albany also gave me credit for things that I had skipped. I started Yeshiva College.
Okay, before we get to that, I want to ask you, while you were in Europe still, in the various stops, were you aware of what was happening?
Yeah. Yes, definitely.
You were aware from other family members, from the news,
No, from general news, from general news and so on.
And did you still have family that was left in Vienna?
A close family, no. No.
Okay. So you come to New York. Where do you go in New York?
I went to Yeshiva.
Yeah, where'd your family move to? Where'd you live?
What? We lived in Brooklyn, 12th Avenue. First. Later on, parents moved to Washington Heights. But first we lived in 12th Avenue in Brooklyn, Borough Park, at the edge of Borough Park. At the time...
Did your father, was he able to get a job?
In England, he worked in all sorts of things. Ridiculous things. Whatever I was able to get. Hungarian Jews are often very ambitious, and I know part of the things he did, he worked for Hungarian Jews. They had set up some, I won't call it a company, some workstations. He worked in all sorts of things to make a living. No, what was I saying?
Before we go on to life in New York, at any point while your parents were trying to figure out where to go, was there discussion of trying to go to Palestine?
No.
Was your family at all Tzioni? Was that something that was that talked about at all growing up?
No. My family was not Tzioni in the thing. I'll come to the Tzioni business in a minute. No, they were trying to get to America because we had uncles there. had that family there. The thing. Now, my father had a half-brother who, after the war, I think managed to get something back in Poland or Ukraine. I'm not at all sure. We didn't get anything. Also, my father had, there was a daughter, I think she was the daughter of the half-brother, because there was a big difference in age, her brother, who she apparently learned medicine, but her husband also was a doctor. And she and the husband managed to get out. That's an interesting story. At the time when the Nazis were already in Vienna, her husband was still in the hospital, in the general hospital, doctor in the general hospital, and an Austrian Nazi got sick, was put into the hospital, and the doctors didn't know what was wrong with him. And this cousin of my the husband took a look at him and said, he has einseitige Lungenentzündung. The German, the lung on one side has an infection. He said, why? How did he know? Because he saw him breathing, only one side was working. And so this Nazi, Austrian Nazi, was apparently a little bit of a mensch, and he arranged for this doctor who managed to save him. He got treatment on the thing to get out. Was able to get out. So they got out. They got to the States. Eventually. They had a child, a son of theirs, recently visited us here in Israel. We keep some contact with them.
What's the name?
Strumpf, I think. No. Strumpf was the name of the sister in Switzerland. I don't know. What is the name? I'll remember it now.
Okay. All right, so now it's 1945.
Yes.
You're in New York.
In New York.
With your family, and you're starting...
In the Yitzhak
in the yeshiva and in the college.
And in the college, right. But I got college credit, say, from what I'd done in England. And so I was in yeshiva. The morning we learned Limudei Kodesh. In the afternoon at the college, and later on at a certain stage, you learned until 3 o'clock Limudei Kodesh, and the college after 3.
Do you remember whose shir you were in? Who's your Rev?
Some of it, yes. Don't remember now the name. I'll remember it later. Eventually, climbing from shir to shir, I was with David Lifshitz shir, and after that, in the shir of Yosef Dov Soloveitchik. Yosef Dov Soloveitchik shir. And I got learned the smicha, learned the smicha, and I got smicha. And I did something which was illegal at the time. Why? Because when you're learning for smicha, you were not allowed to do any other things. And I learned for smicha and mechavusa. One was normally lamb, and another one, I'll remember in a minute. And I decided I wasn't going to be a Rov. Why? Because I know myself, I'm not a people's person. I don't like dealing with people. And a Rov, you have to be a people's person. So I knew I wasn't going to be a Rov. So what was I going to do? In Eretz Yisrael, I was going to go to Eretz Yisrael. Why was I going to go to Eretz Yisrael? Not Zioni Klali, but because Shitat HaRamban, that it's a mitzvah to live in Eretz Yisrael. And already there'd been a couple of friends of mine, or chavut, friends, not actually chavut, but in yeshiva, who had gone to Eretz Yisrael on scholarships and had learned law here.
Who were they?
I don't remember. I don't remember now the thing, two of them.
Was Eliyahu Kanofsky?
Kanofsky was around, but it's not one of the two. Remember. Later on, I can't remember.
And what did you study in Yeshiva College?
Huh?
What did you study in Yeshiva College?
I studied chemistry and mathematics in Yeshiva College. I had the two majors. Anyway, since chemistry, there was a chemical industry in Eretz Yisrael at the time because of the Dead Sea. So I decided to continue chemistry. So while I was learning for smicha, I also went illegally to Colombia and doing first a master's and then a doctorate in chemistry. Because the later stage doctors were legal already. I had already gone. When I went in for the smicha examination, then I got smicha.
From who? Who tested you for the smicha?
Rav Belkin, Rav Schatzkes, Rav Yosef Dovtzelovechik. When I went in to arrange for the smicha, so Rav Belkin said to me, "Nu Shona, how is Colombia?" Right? They knew I was going to Colombia. They kept quiet. As long as I did what I was supposed to, they kept quiet. They knew, they just wanted to show me, we know you're doing it. Anyway, I eventually got my doctor in Colombia, and I got a job for a while in the upstate in the medical school of Columbia, which is in Washington Heights. So we lived in Washington Heights. I met my wife. No, the reason how I met my wife was I was living in Ballpark. There was a young man's minion. Tziri Agudat Israel. I was not an Agudanik, I was a Mizrachinik, because I wanted to go to Eretz Yisrael. The English Aguda was even against Eretz Yisrael. But in the States, they tolerated me, and not only that, they tried to convert me to be an Agudanik. And there was a couple of, in that boys' minion, there were a couple of brothers who had bought an old jalopy, and during one summer, but forget, I guess it was in '53, or so. There was a keynote of Agudat Israel, or Tziri Agudat Israel, in upstate New York, in the Bosch Belt, as it were. And they were trying to, as it were, to convert me. They said, come up with us. We have a car, we'll take you up, and so on. At the time, I had just gone out with a girl a couple of times. It was very smart, but cold. So I'd gone out with many girls. Usually I used to go out at least twice. There were only 2 cases where I done only once. Twice. Then I would tell a girl, no Yetzer Hara. So, but they said to go up. And I just got out with a very smart girl a couple of times, but cold, very cold. In fact, later on it turned out she couldn't have children. She adopted. She had tzarot tzurot from the adopted child. All that was later on. Anyway, I said, okay. She was going up to this keynote, so I figured there'd be other girls too. So I went up. I said, okay, this time I'll go up with you, but I'm telling you, I'm not going up because you're converting me. I'm going up because I'm trying to meet some girl. And that's where I met my wife. Because her mother was a Hasidic, her father was a Chosid, the Chosid, he was a Rav Hasidi. The mother was very smart. I really liked her. She lived until almost 103. Eventually, she died never, because kids ran into her, threw her over, and she never recovered from that fall. But she lived to almost 103. And as I say, she was a very smart woman. She had sent her son, I said, take along your sister. And of course, she was intending she should meet somebody there, and she did. So.
What was her name?
What
was
Frieda. Friede.
What was the last name?
Roker. Frieda Roker. As I say, she's gotten sick, and now I have to take care of her and so on. But I told her I intend to go to Eretz Yisrael. She said, okay, I'm willing to try. So we got to here. She worked for the city as a psychologist. And then she worked also for a Jewish, religious, Bnei Brak, religious home for problematic girls. And they liked her very much. And over here, you see an appreciation of her work. The children there, she had dealt with when she quit. But now she lives on a bunch of medicines and so on. But Baruch Hashem, with the medicines, we're getting along. Now, where was I?
So you're getting smicha, and Dr. Belkin knows your whole story, that you've been...
but as long as it's considered a good boy, didn't. So I got smicha. And then I worked at, I had gotten my PhD, I worked at Columbia Medical School, which was not far from Yeshiva. In the middle of the day, I would skip over to Yeshiva to hear the Shia and come back to work. Then, as I say, Shittat Ramban is a mitzvah to live in Eretz Yisrael. one who was in charge of a teacher's college at Yeshiva. What is his name? No, terrible memory, I'll probably remember. Who'd been from Eretz Yisrael, who'd come to Yitzhak was going back to Eretz Yisrael to set up a religious university in Bar Ilan here. And so he was looking for people to come. I said, I had set up the chemistry department in Bar Ilan. He gave me the job. I did. Then I taught all the various subjects in chemistry, except physical chemistry. Physical chemistry, I wasn't going to talk. So I took a man by the name of Schechter to teach physical chemistry.
This is what year? When was?
1 second. Excuse me.
Okay. You were recruited to go help with a new university that they were starting, Bar Ilan, and they were going to teach chemistry, but you didn't teach physical chemistry.
No, yeah, and I took a man named Schechter. He then took in an acquaintance of his who I did not think was up to par. So when it came my time to take Shabbaton, or the thing, I went up I took a Shabbaton at the Tel Aviv University. Now, as I say, exactly the dates I don't remember, but I want to say one thing, that I had a hand in setting up Tel Aviv University. Why? Originally, Tel Aviv University was a mechon in Abu Kabir. It was only a mechon. And at the time, the salaries in the universities were so low that couldn't manage on the salary alone, especially Bar Ilan wasn't paying the regular salary. And so I had to teach in Abu Kabir also. I used to bicycle, right? During a number of years I cycled then to Bar Ilan also. Over a number of years, 5 of my bicycles were stolen. But even when I chained them, they cut the chain and so. Anyway, then I set up Tel Aviv University at the beginning also, the chemistry. And they had doctoral students there. We should say that at the beginning, the Hebrew University tried to prevent other universities being set up. They tried very much. Who was not in accord with this was the man in charge of chemistry in the Technion. Ginsburg was his name. And he advised Bar Ilan also, and I became very friendly with Ginsburg. Ginsburg and myself were the first 2 people to teach modern chemistry in Israel. Before that, the chemistry taught in Israel, even the book, the Hebrew book in chemistry, was chemistry that was already outdated 100 years ago, if I may say so. But Ginsberg and myself were the first two people to teach. And then when they set up Beersheba, a doctoral student of mine from Tel Aviv University was given the job in chemistry, so that in fact we have a basis of chemistry in Israel. And also I got for a number of years, I was consulting with the Dead Sea Works also. Now, well...
How long did you stay at Bar Ilan?
How long was it? Then I came back to Bar Ilan. Well, that has no simple answer. Because when I retired, my official retirement age, I continued teaching on an hourly basis. Till it just became too difficult for me physically. But I have students of mine who later on took over Bar Ilan and continued, as I say. Nowadays, Ginsberg and myself set the basis of modern chemistry in Eretz Israel.
I know a couple of the chemistry Bar Ilan chemistry people. Aryeh Frimmer.
Frimmer is one, yes, definitely.
Chaim Sukenik.
Sukenik is one, but Sukenik then took on the job in Yerushalayim.
Yeah, Machon Lev. Yeah. All right, I want to go back a little bit. When you were at Yeshiva College,
yes,
it's 1945, 6, 7, 8, right? Around then. So, what you said that you were not Nagudanik, but you were Mizrachanik. So, what did that mean? What were you? What did you?
No. בכלל, האווירה ביצחון was more Mizrahi. I remember that Rav Yosef Dov Soloveitchik was a candidate for the Rav Rashi in Tel Aviv in 1932. He didn't get the job, but it was. Another Rav with whom I learned, Rav David Lifshitz, when he retired, came to Eretz Israel. In fact, he was a Mesada Kiddushin for my daughter. I had a daughter. So that the general outlook in Yitzhak Roman was more. In fact, Bar Ilan was set up by the man who at the time was in charge of a teacher's college in Yitzhak Roman. Within the building of Yitzhak Roman, there was, I think, the second story was a teacher's college. Mm-hmm. And came, so the general outlook, Avira, there. Also, and I said, and two people even got scholarships, lawyers in Eretz Israel.
Were people that were at Yeshiva College involved mostly in like Hashomer Hadati or Bnei Akiva, or were people also in Beitar?
No, I don't remember anybody in Beitar. But there was no interaction. In other words, let's say this, if you went to Shomer Hadati, that was your private business. There was no official interaction with Mizrahi.
So I heard a story once about a couple of the Twerskis.
What?
The Twerski?
Twerski?
Yeah. That were in Yeshiva, and they were involved in Beitar. And Rav Soloveitchik was not happy with that.
I don't remember. Twerski is a son-in-law of Soloveitchik.
I know. One of them, but his brothers were the ones.
I don't know.
Okay.
I didn't know about that.
Were people in getting involved in helping out to try and be And we've heard stories about people who were helping pack up materials to
I
send.
tell you one thing. In 47, during a summer vacation, Norman Lamb and myself phoned up what was then called an office Landseas, but actually representation of Israel, but in the company Landseas, what we could do. They said, don't talk on the phone, come down to us. Because apparently they thought their phones were being tapped. So we went down to the thing, and they said, go up to a certain place in upstate New York.
Do you remember who you spoke with in this office?
In
the office that you called?
I don't remember. I'll tell you in a minute. We went to a certain place upstate where a Jew had an area, owned the area, a big town, and
It was like in the Catskills?
What?
In the Catskills, or where was this?
Somewhere in the Catskills. And there he met Felix Bergman. He was the brother of Ernst Bergman. Ernst Bergman at the university. And Felix was his brother. He was involved in the medical school here. And Felix Bergman, two chemists, we developed Homer Hodef, not the explosive that damages, but that sends. In Yerushalayim, there was a kikar, the Davidka, and Davidka, it's a mortar, right? And he said a mortar, you have to have some material that sends it. And we were developing Homer Hodef Avuham Davidka. The thing.
And you were there with Norman Lamb?
Norman Lamb.
Who else was there?
As I say, among our younger, no one. But Felix Bergman was in charge. I know he used to go take a dip in the morning in the cold stream there. In fact, I had never told anybody about this until recently, before he passed away. Norman Lamb told about it, and I thought, well, one should talk about it, but he talked about it. So.
I actually interviewed Norman Lamb about this story.
Yeah.
So he told me the story, but this was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And he said that one of the times when you were up there, that the FBI came.
It's possible. It's possible. Yeah.
But did you tell your parents that you were doing this? Where did your parents think about this?
No. We didn't talk. In my opinion, the less you say, the better. I didn't.
Okay. And did you tell people, did people from school know? Did people from Yeshiva College know?
Not that I'm aware, not other people that weren't involved.
Norman Lamb had said that he mentioned the name of the dean at the time.
Isaac.
Yeah,
He
Moses.
was anti-Zioni.
Anti-Zioni.
Isaac is anti-Zioni. I know there was some Zioni occasion, I forgot already what it was, that Isaac said, I won't give him a commendation to the best jail.
Okay. And he had also mentioned somebody else as part of the story that was Professor Peckerus?
Peckerus.
What was he? How was he part of the story?
I don't know exactly. He's from Yerushalayim, because I don't remember. What? I know he was involved, but I don't remember how.
Okay, he mentioned a couple other people that were didn't go with you, but were part of the same chevra. Was William Frank?
Willie Frank. Willie Frank was a genius, mamish, in mathematics. When Einstein once visited, they sent Willie Frank to talk with Einstein. Willie Frank was also in the same dorm room with me, incidental. But he was never. But he never died. His head, I don't know what developed in his mind and so on. He all the time he had problems sleeping. He used to have a bottle of wine in the dorm room, and he would drink wine before going to sleep in order to allow him to sleep. Not only that, Willie Frank went out with my wife before I did. But she didn't take with him.
He had mentioned another name, Matthew Cass.
Matthew Katz, yeah. Matty Katz.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember anymore. It was around.
Do you remember the United Nations, the November 29th vote for November 29th, 1947, the vote for Palestine?
Not anything special. I don't remember anything special.
How about when the state was declared in May of 1948?
Yes.
Remember anything that happened or anything at yeshiva that happened then?
No, just what I told you. You went down to Lancis, but otherwise I don't remember.
אולי תשאל אם עד כמה הוא מודע לפעילות של פיטר ברדסון, בין איך, ההצגות.
At the time, also, there was a group of Hillel Cook, who was called Peter Bergson. They were working to try and raise attention of what was happening in Europe and how American Jews weren't doing enough to speak up.
No, I don't know. All I hear is later stories, but that, as I say, I heard stories that American Jews did try to speak to Roosevelt, and he essentially turned them down. He said to somebody, what am I going to do with so many Jews? Which is, of course, stupid, because look at what the Jews have done all over. America would have progressed much more rapidly and much better if he had allowed Jews to come in. But he didn't.
Did some of your classmates stay like in academia in the United States?
Not that I didn't follow. Don't remember following any of them.
Did you stay in touch with any of the people? Did you stay in touch with Norman Lamb?
I stayed in touch with Norman Lamb, but he nevertheless lost ability. His two sons told me eventually that you can't talk to him. I tried to talk to him.
And when you were at Bar Ilan, were there other Americans that came also to help set up Bar Ilan?
As I say, there was some in mathematics. But no, that he wasn't from America. He was from England. My sister then came to set up the psych department, which came a little bit later. But eventually she never. This is also has nowadays. Sometimes you can talk to her, sometimes you can't. I don't know. It happens.
Rav Soloveitchik, were you close with Rav Soloveitchik?
I was probably one close. One second, I'll come back to this later. Who was close of Aaron Lichtenstein, married his daughter. Was close. Aaron came in to Yeshiva University from another yeshiva in East New York.
Torba Das or no, not Torba Das. Yeah. Okay.
From East Brooklyn. To say it's because he eventually married. I think he handpicked him to marry his daughter. But I have one distinction, which I think not many people have, if anybody, that Rav Soloveitchik apologized to me. What was? He said a Shia. He was terrific in analysis, not so good in synthesis, but he was terrific in analysis. Anyway, he said a Shia and analyzed and so on. And I asked him a kasha from a Totzes that later on in the Gemara. I think it was Brochus we were learning, or Shabbos. I think it was Brochus. And so he answered what he answered. So I asked him what he answered. So he answered the second time. Something else. So I asked him what he'd answered. And so he got annoyed at me. He said, "Idiot!" He called me idiot. So I attacked him. At the time, he was suffering from Kivkefa, what's it called? Kivkefa.
Okay.
What's the Kivkefa?
Intestinal. No.
Ulcus?
No, ulcus, right. Yes, he was suffering ulcus. And he had to give a Shia with a glass of milk on the table. And get him annoyed, hurted him. So after the Shia, I went up to apologize that I got him annoyed. Before I could open my mouth, he apologized to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about Dr. Belkin?
Dr. Belkin, what did I say? I told you, he wasn't particularly Zionist that I know. Mm-hmm. But he knew his student. He gave, I could say something to Belkin. When we were learning Yeridea, Dr. Belkin tried to resume giving a shiur instead of being administrative or something like that. He gave one or two shiurim, a couple of shiurim, maybe more than a couple, 2, 3 shiurim on Yeridea, excellent shiurim on Yeridea, but then he couldn't keep it up. He stopped. It was too much for him.
This is what happens a lot of times. People who are excellent educators and then they become administrators and they miss the educational part. They don't get to give shiurim as much, but it's hard to keep both.
A couple of excellent on Yeridea.
Trying to think if there's anything else. We interviewed your mechutin, Avi Ezri Frankel,
Peleg, yes.
Yeah. Also, we hear about Haganah and about computers and.
Computers. He was in the Weizmann Institute.
Yeah.
He was in the Weizmann Institute.
Yeah, the closure in מכון Weizmann. Yeah.
Oh, I was going to tell you about Weizmann. When Bar-Ilan eventually gave a BA, and the Hebrew University was very much against it, and so on. So I wanted my students, those who were interested in continuing to a second and third degree, so I sent them to Weizmann and to the Technion. And I said, examine them, give them an examination, see what they know. And they examined them and they accepted them immediately, without any problems. I mean, the Weizmann Institute and Technion were objective. I had no problem with them.
You said something about the Dead Sea.
What?
About the Dead Sea, Yam HaMelach.
What?
You said something about all the treasure that you work. Can you say something? It was
Malag, at the first month, eventually they saw that the Technion and the Weizmann and Weizmann acceptance, they had no choice but to recognize.
Bar-Ilan also.
Is
What do you talk about the Yam Mifalei Yam HaMelach? Did you work with?
I consulted for the Yam HaMelach.
What can you talk about? What?
No, those are technical things.
Mhm.
okay.
Technical things.
Did you ever see that Bergman again? That had been with you in upstate New York?
No, not here.
He was he in academia also?
Yeah, he was in academia. He taught in the biochemistry department of
Mm-hmm.
Hebrew University.
Okay. Anything else that you remember about anybody involved in those years in Zionism, Israel? Was there somebody from yeshiva that was on the Altalena?
Not that I'm aware of.
Smitty?
No.
Not David Smith?
No.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. This was great. Very interesting.
No,
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
nothing. Okay. Going from England to America, end of 44, I think I mentioned, you got to America,
In 45.
to Halifax.
No?
To Halifax, yeah.
To Halifax in convoy 2 weeks. That was 44, 45, yeah.
44, it's
End of
before the end
44,
of the war.
Yeah, that's why we went in convoy. I mean, remember, at the time, immigration to America was controlled by, I don't know what they call it, number of quotas, by quotas, the Polish quota. We were on the Polish quota, which wasn't very good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Name.
Oh, all right. as I said, since my grandfather, as I say, he had 3 wives, he had children only from the first and the third wife. My father had a sister. She apparently perished in Europe. But when my father went to get married, named Sprecher, it turned out that his father, Aaron Sprecher, had married his third wife, only Kiddushin. And so he was an illegitimate child by the laws at the time. And eventually agreed to give him his mother's name, Shona. Shona, her name was Spiro Shona. Shapiro is Shona. When we became citizens in 1950, we changed our name back to Sprecher, to my grandfather's name, and then the naturalization certificate on the back it says we changed the name to Sprecher.
But then you said a different name. Milon?
Milon, that's something else. Milon is my first name. When I was born, anti-Semitism was already rampant in Europe. So while they called me Shmuel Sprecher, they didn't want to call me Samuel because of the anti-Semitism. And my cousin, Blech, had all called Shmuel Sprecher. As a baby, he used to say, me. And so they called him Milon, Shem Chiba. So they took his Shem Chiba and gave it to me.
Okay.
And then, okay.
Yes, please.
Maybe to an underdeveloped country until he was about a half a year old. So I went in Elul. He was born Chofet Av, and I went in Elul to the opening of Bar Ilan. And the son was in America.
Wow. Who was the Kohen?
Cohen was associated with the Belgrade Yeshiva. I had a cousin here who he was a rabbi of the Belgrade Yeshiva.
Wow. So the Pidyon Ben was here without the Ben.
Right.
I have my father was a Bechor, so he had a Pidyon Ben. I'm a Bechor, had a Pidyon Ben. My oldest son, Bechor, Pidyon Ben, long.
מה זה פיג'ון הבן?
Pidyon Ben זה
פדיון הבן.
Pidyon Ben.
But here it was without.
But you're a Levy, so
You don't need a big
Yeah.
אוקיי.
Yes.
okay.
These pictures, I can just tell you, my father, no, that's not it. My father, I liked pictures of Jews, so he gave them to me, who needed it. Take these down, these two things. And this.
זה ההסמכה?
כן.
אוקיי. פרופסור. אז רגע, זה מה שהוא קיבל בארצות הברית?
זה בארצות הברית.
כן.
זה פה. Yeah. Just my father pictures of Jews.
Which one?
No,
Father,
like picture.
pictures of Jews.
אוקיי.
It's only part of the